would like to welcome you to our virtual event. The program will begin momentarily. While we are waiting, I want to review a few housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded, and a recording will be posted to the New America events page within 48 hours after the event. Attendees will be in listen-only mode, and you will not be able to be seen or heard by your fellow attendees or panelists. Therefore, we encourage you to share your comments and questions in the Slido box located to the right of the video. Closed captioning is available by hovering over the video and clicking CC at the bottom of the video. If you encounter any issues during the event, please contact events@newamerica.org. Thank you for joining us. We will begin momentarily.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Julia Panfil, and I'm the director of the Future of Land and Housing program at New America, and we're so excited to have you all with us today. Next slide, please. The Future of Land and Housing program is a team of housing policy entrepreneurs who find overlooked, high-leverage solutions to big housing stability challenges, partner with civic organizations and innovators to test and refine those solutions, and leverage our national network and platforms to spotlight solutions and accelerate adoption and scale. And today, we are here to tell you about the Eviction Data Response Network, a really exciting opportunity to accelerate your state's work on building eviction data infrastructure and leveraging this data to drive down evictions. Before diving in, I'll just quickly introduce our Eviction Data Response Network team. Our initiative director, Ian Fletcher, our Future of Land and Housing Program Deputy Director, Sabiha Zainalbai, and our Future of Land and Housing Program Policy Associate, Helen Bonnyman. Next slide, please. So today we will provide you a little bit of background on this opportunity, why improved access to and analysis of eviction data is so crucial for improving housing stability, and how this application program and then the actual implementation of the State Eviction Data Response Network will go. We will go through the application process, and then at the end, we will save plenty of time for your questions and answers. So please do use the chat function to drop your Q&A into the chat, and we'll save about half of this webinar for going through all of the Q&A. And with that, I will hand things over to my colleague, Sabiha.
Good, thanks, Julia. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabiha Zainalbai, and I'm just going to start out by sharing a bit more about what brought us here today. Next slide. So over the last 7 years, our program has worked to improve eviction data in a variety of ways. We've conducted research and analysis on evictions at the local, national, and local level. We've advocated for improved eviction data through increased funding and technical assistance. Next slide, please. We've convened working groups of data and eviction experts and developed tools and resources to help communities collect, make sense of, and use this data. This includes things like the foreclosure and eviction analysis tool, a comprehensive research guide for using court data to analyze evictions, and a set of eviction court data standards. And lastly, we have partnered directly with over 24 housing communities to build capacity for an improved eviction data infrastructure at the city and county level. Next slide, please. So the opportunity we're talking about today builds off the inaugural cohort of the Eviction Data Response Network, which was launched in the fall of 2024. The catalyst for this network is that while eviction analysis is incredibly important, it's really the infrastructure that supports and sustains all of this that is so often ad hoc or underfunded or siloed. And so this is really where the crux of the work for building a more robust eviction data system lies. So over the course of the last year, we brought together 9 city and county partners from local government agencies, nonprofit service providers, and public universities, and supported them in building a more detailed understanding of eviction data in their communities. Our local EDRN partners, they all operated in different legal, political, and data contexts. For example, some had access to court data, but needed to build and strengthen partnerships across their housing ecosystem for that data to be effectively leveraged. Others received maybe impartial data from the courts, but sought to fill in the gaps to provide a fuller picture of evictions. And others maybe had detailed data from service providers, but only on a subset of households facing eviction and needed a comprehensive view of who was caught up in the legal system at any given time. Next slide, please. So through EDRN, our partners received one-on-one guidance and technical assistance that was tailored specifically to their context. They engaged cross-partner learning opportunities through virtual and in-person meetings, and they also were connected with a host of eviction data technical experts to help them work through roadblocks and specific challenges. But this work can really take time. But nonetheless, these 9 EDRN partners made meaningful progress over the course of the year. They not only built connective tissue across their housing landscape, but they also accessed crucial eviction data often for the first time. We dropped the full recap of this inaugural cohort and the progress that these partners made in the chat, so you can take a closer look. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ian Fletcher to talk more about today's opportunity.
Thanks, Sabiha. Hi, everyone. As Sabiha mentioned, my name is Ian Fletcher, and I'm new to the Future of Land and Housing team and the Initiative Director role for the Eviction Data Response Network. I'm really excited to lead this project and share a bit more about the opportunity we have to improve eviction data infrastructure in the US. Next slide, please. So thanks to a generous grant from the Balmer Group, New America was awarded funding to launch the state-level EDRN, expanding on the learnings from the initial local cohort level that Sabiha mentioned last year. Next slide. So we envision several elements of what we're offering to state-level entities invited to join EDRN. At a high level, the first element is being a part of a dedicated cohort of peers, totaling 10 states over 2 years. Think of this as part boot camp, part accelerator, part community of practice. The second element is the capacity funding award opportunity. Each grantee will receive up to $150,000 to dedicate capacity for leading the eviction data infrastructure work. Think of this as your state's eviction data officer. And to unlock the $150,000, we're asking for a one-to-one cash match, which we will get into momentarily. The third element is technical expertise from data scientists, technologists, analysts, fractional CTO, you name it. We're unleashing these folks who can get under the hood of your data systems to code, sync, automate, collect, fix, clean, visualize your eviction data to be timely, comprehensive, accurate, and actionable. Next slide. So the first objective we have for EDRN participating states is to convene and operationalize what we're calling an eviction data problem-solving team. This is inclusive of both state-level leaders and local-level actors to clear the path for getting the critical eviction data across your state, meeting regularly to drive progress, and creating a feedback loop when challenges arise. You can think of this as the kind of relational qualitative objective. Some of you on this call may be really well situated for being on the problem-solving team, rather than the primary applicant in EDRN. And we just encourage you to navigate that positioning with your own state-level partners during the application process. The second objective we have is to develop a centralized, reliable, shared data infrastructure. This is the more technical, quantitative objective where you're collecting eviction data at a row level in your court jurisdictions and are ultimately able to sort and visualize this at both a jurisdictional and a state level. And when we say statewide, we mean that at least 80% of evictions happening in the state are covered, not just data on clients accessing legal aid or other services. And the last objective we have is around leveraging the data you're collecting to reduce evictions and keep more families housed. This is the marrying of the first two objectives for advocacy and communications to inform policy or administrative changes, that are sustainable, data-driven, and person-centered. Next slide, please. So to achieve these objectives, we have a variety of ways that we expect to be working with the states who are selected. We envision one-on-one coaching between our team and yours, our crew of technologists, and whatever those kind of individual state level supports are needed. We also envision cohort meetings where you are meeting with your peer states, whether that's a topic specific webinar, whether that's virtual connections across states. But really, there's the idea of the peer group is critical to learning from one another, not just New America or our partners. We also will have state on-sites where we're going to come to your state in person, meet with your eviction data problem-solving team, set or refine a strategy, and celebrate success because this work is really challenging. We also want to invite participating organizations to our office in DC, where we will have, again, more cohort peer-based learning and a reflection of the work to date. Next slide. So we believe that you'll get out what you put in. And with that dedicated capacity that we mentioned, this is a rigorous systems change effort. We want you to hire or repurpose existing staff for a full-time dedicated capacity in the form of some kind of state eviction data officer position. As it has been said before, coordination has to be somebody's job or else it doesn't happen. And that will be this person's job so that it does. If you don't think you can hire or repurpose this position until a year into the award, it may suit you to consider an alternative applicant for your state who can. Because there is dedicated capacity, we also want to see solid attendance in the cohort and the one-on-one coaching, as well as the annual state on-site and our DC convening. We want to see the eviction data problem-solving team meeting regularly, deciding on goals, and clearing the path for local entities to collect eviction data. And finally, this is all about learning. We believe that the lessons from the 10 states in EDRN can have a profound impact on both the state and federal landscape around eviction data and eviction prevention. And we're positioning states to be the experts in their own experience. We want to hear from you how it's going along the way, warts and all, so that we can improve on our own work and build on a model for the field. Based on 28 states who've registered for this call, we know that collecting eviction data can be challenging, and you're looking for solutions. So we want to see mindsets for improvement, not just mindsets for judgment on how challenging it can be. Next slide. So this is our general time frame for the two-year cohort engagement, which we expect to start with the first cohort of several states this summer. We're going to be bringing on the remaining states once we're underway with that first cohort, mostly to scale up our coaching model and grow our own capacity. You can see we're in the application and review process, just starting out, and then we'll be ultimately selecting a few of those states in that first cohort. And my colleague Helen is going to get more into the actual application process after I'm done. Next slide, please. So we anticipate that for many of you, the match requirement is going to pose a lot of questions. So we're hoping to head some of those off right now. The 10 states selected will receive up to $150,000 in pass-through funds that require a one-to-one cash match. These are non-federal pass-through dollars provided by Ballmer Group. The purpose of targeting the $150,000 for capacity building funding is because we believe that not having dedicated capacity will inhibit a state's success. So we want to make sure that the states selected are sufficiently resourced to achieve the goals of EDRN. There's got to be someone who's convening, coordinating, project managing all of these functions, deliverables, and stakeholders. A total budget of $300,000 per state, we believe allows for that 2-year runway to achieve these goals. We're requiring a cash match and not an in-kind match because we want to ensure buy-in for EDRN in a way that expands current capacity. As you'll see in the application, question 5B, we are not asking for proof in a match letter by March 3rd. We are asking about how you foresee appropriately resourcing and sustaining this effort. Because each section in this application will be scored by our review panel, we want to dissuade people from just throwing out a bunch of funder prospects. And while it is not necessary to demonstrate cash match at time of submission, feasibility of obtaining cash match will be a factor for scoring. We will be asking for proof of cash match prior to dispersing any funds to the selected 10 states. If a state is only able to provide 100,000 in cash match at that time, then that's what we distribute. But we strongly encourage maximizing the full 150,000. If you are unsure of whether what you want to include as match is a cash match or in kind, cash is exactly as it sounds, money that is available in an account and will be spent towards eligible grant activities. This could be reallocation of an existing budget or pursuing new grant funds from philanthropy for a cash match as examples. So one example right now, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has an open opportunity that may be worth reviewing. In-kind is a non-monetary contribution, such as volunteered time, products, equipment, or services. Essentially, transactions where money does not change hands would be considered in-kind. We welcome additional questions about the funding and cash match in the Q&A, but would direct you to our edrn@New America email address for questions that are specific to your organizations or unique circumstance. That's the best way to ensure you get the clarity you're looking for on the specifics of your question. Next slide. So in an effort to make the implicit explicit, and if you've just listened to me talk and are thinking, well, we're doing some of these activities, we can collect some data and have an existing work group, then great. Tell us about that in your application and how you want to expand on it. But if you're thinking, we aren't doing any of those activities, we can't collect data, or we don't have the partners at the table now, that's okay too. In your application, we want to hear about the challenges you're facing and your vision for how participating in EDRN could overcome some of those challenges and ultimately transform your eviction data infrastructure in your state. Now that you've heard about the programmatic elements of EDRN, I'm going to pass it to my colleague Helen to dig into the specifics of the application process.
Hello, thanks, Ian. My name is Helen Bonnyman, and I'm a policy associate on the Future of Land and Housing team at New America. So I'll be talking, as Ian mentioned, about the specifics of how you're going to apply if interested for this opportunity. Next slide, please. So looking at the timeline going ahead for the application, they opened last Monday, and then next step would be the informational webinar, which you're tuned into right now. Thanks for being here. And then the next step is that all applications need to be submitted by 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, March 3rd. Later in March, we'll be contacting applicants for interviews as needed. We didn't want to make the application itself too onerous, and so this interview step will give us the opportunity to learn more and go deeper with finalists to better understand their eviction data context and stakeholders, as well as their experience working with cross-sector working groups like the Eviction Data Problem-Solving Team. We plan to announce 3 to 5 selected states to join the first EDRN cohort by mid-April. And we may also invite some additional applicants not selected for the first cohort to participate in a second cohort at a later date. Next slide, please. So let's talk about now what's in the application. The overall goal of the application is for you to bring us into your vision for what analyzing and sharing eviction data could accomplish in your state, and show us why you're the right organization to lead the charge. We'll be asking for short answer responses that get at Who are you and what does your organization do? And section 2, eviction data context. What does eviction data access currently look like in your state? Are there already data collection efforts, either at the state or local levels, to build off of, and whether from your own organization or from others? And do these include information on eviction filings, judgments, both, neither, or some other data fields? Does your state have a unified court system or only local judicial districts? Are court records on evictions recorded electronically or on paper? Every state, and very often every jurisdiction within a state, has its own legal process for evictions, but try to capture in broad strokes as best you can to get at the statewide level, as we know the word count is short and we're just looking for a snapshot here. I'll note that this section, and trying to get at the context you're working within, it's not intended to weed out anyone. We really are just trying to get an accurate picture of the challenges, and we welcome participants in the cohort who are entering at varying levels of existing data, eviction data work. But the one exception to that I'll mention is in states where courts and most population centers use paper instead of electronic records, then the scope and resourcing of EDRN may not allow for participation at this time. So moving on to section 3, program narrative. This is where you'll lay out that vision for what eviction data access could mean for housing stability in your state. Let us know how you would engage with existing eviction prevention efforts in your state. And note that this is separate from or different from the question in the previous section asking about the eviction data access context. That's talking about eviction prevention efforts versus eviction data efforts. They might be different. Also in this section, we'll ask about anticipated challenges to accomplishing your vision, which might relate to data access, political or stakeholder relationships, or other factors. In section 4, let us know who the main stakeholders are who need to be at the table to usher this work forward. Which are organizations you've worked with before, and which would you be meeting for the first time? And have you collaborated with or led large stakeholder groups before? How do relevant stakeholders in the eviction prevention space view your organization? In section 5, on budget, you'll get down to the nuts and bolts of how you'd bring about the vision you previously laid out. You'll have the opportunity to upload a draft job description or describe the duties of the staff member who'd be carrying out the day-to-day work of EDRN. Whether a new hire or existing staff, we want to see that this staff member's time is protected and truly dedicated to EDRN, not split among many different projects. So many of our previous partners, and likely many of us on this call today, are trying their best to move the needle on eviction prevention and data work, but find their time and attention constrained by so many competing needs. Providing funds to support dedicated staff time is one of the key value adds that we hope EDRN offers to participating states. As Ian mentioned earlier, we're not expecting applicants to have the cash match ready to go by March 3rd when applications are due. That being said, in this section of the application, we want to get a sense of where you plan to source your match and your non-binding outlook on the longevity of that funding. You'll be able to download the budget template from the application portal and then re-upload it as part of your submission. When populating that template, you'll only be entering information in the pink cells on the Detailed tab. The Summary tab auto-populates from the Detailed tab. And please be aware that if awarded, this doesn't represent your final budget. Finally, we ask for 3 letters of support from stakeholders in the world of eviction prevention and data in your state. At least one of them needs to be written by a state agency, like a Department of Housing and Community Development, or an administrative office of the courts. In some states, state agencies will take a really central role in EDRN, possibly even as a selected partner. And in others, the state may not participate as deeply. Either way, we want to know that there's some acknowledgement or blessing from the state about participation in EDRN. A clear indication of a state agency's commitment to eviction data work, such as a recent press release, interagency council, or existing working group meeting, may be considered instead of this letter. If you are a state agency applying for the EDRN partner role, this letter could come from a higher up at your own agency or from another state agency you see yourself partnering with. The other 2 letters of support should come from other organizations who you'd collaborate with if selected to participate in EDRN. At least one should be from a local level organization to represent that engagement between the state and local levels that drives EDRN forward. Next slide, please. A few points to emphasize about the overall process. We will not award more than one applicant per state, so we're expecting interested applicants will be coordinating with their peers as needed to identify who makes the most sense to apply and participate as the EDRN partner for their state. On the application landing page on New America's website, scroll down to find the drop-down of frequently asked questions. We'll add new questions that come in, whether through the webinar today or as we receive them from the EDRN email here on the screen, in a new section at the bottom of the FAQ page. And finally, when it comes to drafting your responses to the application, you can access Word or PDF versions of the questions at the top of the landing page I just mentioned. Those are just options to help you draft your response. When it comes time to submit, you'll have to input your responses into the portal and upload all your required documents there. Again, the deadline is close of business Eastern Time on March 3rd. Next slide, please. Now that you know how to apply, I'd like to emphasize again who should apply. This application is only for organizations that have the ability to operate at the statewide level, or at least with a reach covering over 80% of renter households statewide. The Census Bureau's American Community Survey data is a good source of information on renter household distribution. There are a lot of different organizations that might fit the bill for an EDRN partner. We want to make sure we're awarding the organization in the state who's best positioned to advance this work, which is what the application and eventual interviews are intended to help us discover. We see potential partners being well positioned for this role who have credibility and influence within the state's housing and justice landscape, the capacity to accomplish the goals of EDRN within the 2-year timeframe, demonstrated buy-in from their leadership to meaningfully dedicate staff time for improving eviction data infrastructure, the ability to convene stakeholders to work together around a shared goal, experience collaborating with actors across the state and at the local level, a demonstrated understanding of the problem to be solved and an improvement mindset, and those who have a feasible path forward to access eviction data. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, or rather, let me start by saying we know that accessing eviction data is a tremendous effort in generally all states, but particularly in places where population centers' eviction records are stored only in paper format, accomplishing the goals of EDRN may not be feasible right now. The list of criteria that I just went through is listed in the eligibility section of the FAQ page. Next slide, please. So here's an example of what a problem-solving team might look like. Of course, the EDRN partner at the center could be any of the organization types I just mentioned on the last slide. And then the eviction data problem-solving team they convene and lead would include technologists, judges and clerks, legal aid, municipal governments, state housing agencies, and tenant advocates, and state universities, and housing service providers, and more. The makeup will depend on the players in your state. Only you and your peers know who is best suited to be at the table and who's best suited to lead. We found overall, when it comes to eviction prevention work, there's really no one entity in our communities that's responsible for addressing the eviction crisis. So it takes a lot of different stakeholders putting their heads together to make progress. Next slide, please. EDRN is about relationships as much as it is about data and technology. This is why the eviction data problem-solving team is so important. We don't want to build a data system or create analytic tools that are not useful to people. EDRN seeks to understand what people need and then bring them together to bridge those gaps, strengthening ties across the state. For example, many applicants may already have tools like dashboards or reports, but they need to build the relationships to ensure they get in front of the right decision makers statewide. One particular relationship I wanted to talk about is with courts, and this will look different according to every state context. Courts hold an important position as the generator of eviction data, whether at the state or regional or local level. We adopt a collaborative posture when engaging with courts and hope that relationship building and data request processes can unlock the data you need. But in some states, that might not be possible. And so your application should provide as much detail as you can on these challenges and ways that you anticipate addressing or overcoming them. Thank you. So with that, I will bring us over to our Q&A portion of the event. I think we've already gotten some great questions in the chat, but if you have more questions, please drop them in and we're happy to answer them.
All right, I might just start with some that I'm going to pop out if that's okay. And then Helen, do you want to jump in on some of yours? So one of the questions was, are all three of the objectives required of each funded entity? In our agency, we have data and analytical capacity, but might want to focus on number three. Is this possible? So we're going to provide dedicated and personalized coaching to each team to advance towards your kind of North Star. We're going to provide support in the areas you need most, but we do want to see all three of those objectives met as at the end of the cohort. Another question is, in our budgets, do we need to include travel costs to the coaching sessions and in-person convenings in DC? So we are covering travel costs as part of our budget. So you would not need to cover those for the budget template. Is the FTE something that each agency would be expected to cover, or would this be covered by the award provided by New America? So we're hoping that our pass-through funding and the matching funding is going to that FTE. So that's why that funding is there for that dedicated capacity. Let's see. Doesn't a common capacity building fund favor larger states? And won't that fixed amount be less effective on a statewide level in those larger states? So we're going to use the application process to make sure that all states are supported regardless of size. And so I would say that we've determined that amount, and that's the amount for our capacity building funding that we're going to distribute. Can the cash match 150,000 come from multiple sources? Absolutely. So, if you have a statewide reach and you see a couple of urban or rural philanthropy groups want to come together, that's fine. Or if you have a state budget that is pulling from a housing department and a court department, totally fine. Will you consider multiple applicants from the same state, or do you expect states to coordinate prior? Will we help with matchmaking? So as Helen mentioned, we would only award one state, one applicant per state. We can help with matchmaking. We see some folks in the chat have offered to kind of convene your state, which is great. If you're not sure if anyone else is applying in your state, you can email our EDRN at New America email. And if we know of someone else, we can connect you. Obviously, if we don't know, if they haven't reached out to us or aren't on this webinar, it'll be tough. But definitely encourage you to have one application per state to show the level of collaboration and coordination that you have a unified front. Can funding go towards an organization's indirect costs? Is there a cap on indirect? So funding can go towards indirect. It's in the budget template, and you'll see that we have a 10% indirect in the budget template. Do you expect us to get buy-in from all those stakeholders at the application stage? Yes. So a crucial part of what we're assessing is an organization's ability to convene and influence across the state. So the ability to get that buy-in is part of the assessment criteria. Let's see here. Helen, I think you might be suited for the other ones.
I'll go ahead and jump in and let you grab a sip of water since you answered so many questions. Thank you, Ian. So one question was whether the slides will be shared by email. Yes, we can definitely send out the slides after the presentation today. And the application is due at 5 p.m. Eastern time on March 3rd. We got another question saying, I'm a little bit unsure of who the primary organization is meant to be when we say states. Is the application a state agency or can it be a related organization? Thanks for asking this question. No, the applicant definitely does not need to be a state agency. When we say states, most of the time we are talking about the partners that we're going to be working with in the EDRN cohort who operate at a state level. So again, that could be a state agency. It could also be a research center from a university. It could be a advocacy group. It could be a legal aid group. I'm probably forgetting a few other examples, but you can find them in the FAQs page and also in the slides. We're looking for a primary organization or an applicant who has state level reach, who has the ability to operate statewide. So for example, if you are a regional organization or a local organization, you might not be the right fit for the state level role. But again, it does not have to be a state agency. It could be from the university or nonprofit sector, most likely, if not a state agency. Next question. Please describe again how the existing court record system might limit participation in the program. Thanks for asking this question. So I think what I intended to convey when touching on this earlier is that in some jurisdictions, court records are recorded solely on paper. And so that means that to go in and access and analyze those records, you'd need to physically go in person and manually go through the books to record those so that they could be analyzed. And the resources available for EDRN participants just don't quite allow for that time-intensive research. Many other jurisdictions the courts record their records electronically. And so we are envisioning that since we're trying to get at a statewide coverage for eviction records, or at least 80% of the renter population, those records really are going to need to be recorded electronically, just so that it's feasible for us to access and analyze them. But if my answer leaves more to be desired, please feel free to follow up in the chat. All right, another question. If a previous cohort included an organization from the state you're in, can you still apply and be eligible for the grant? Yes, definitely. Thanks for asking. If you're curious, you are definitely welcome to reach out to whoever from your state participated, or if you haven't already gotten in touch with them. So when Sabiha was speaking earlier in the chat, there should have been shared a resource that kind of offers a recap or review of the previous locally focused EDRN cohort. And it has a list of all of our partners there. And if you're curious who from your state participated, you can find it there. Let's see. All right, I will go to the question that says, is there value add for states that have a unified judicial system that already reports all eviction filings? So yes, we definitely see a value add there. I will use an example based on our previous work with partners in Indiana who participated in last year's Eviction Data Response Network cohort. Indiana does have a consolidated statewide reporting system, which is really helpful for this work. It puts you at a starting place that's a lot further along than many other participants. But that being said, there's still so much more to go to make sure that that data is translating into effective housing stability strategies. And so what that might look like is, as we mentioned before, EDRN is just as much about tools as it is about relationships. And so not only is there likely work to do to take that existing data and analyze it, visualize it, share it in a actionable way, and then also leveraging that eviction data problem-solving team to make sure that people are understanding this data together getting it in front of the decision makers together, and again, just translating it into actions. So for anyone who is, from a state that has a unified judicial system, that's great. Please include that in your application, and let us know how that would impact the feasibility of accomplishing these goals. All right, I'll take the next question on someone asked regarding stakeholders, what if, and I think also regarding challenges around stakeholders, what if a challenging stakeholder, e.g. the court system, is part of the reason for poor eviction data? What if you can't get their buy-in? Does that mean you can't participate? That's a great question. This does not mean that you can't participate. I think that there's going to be different relationships with the court system in every state that's applying, and that's okay. We're open to helping partners, manage and navigate diverse relationships across the cohort. And so I think that if you're not able to get buy-in from a court system that holds this data, I think for one, in your application, you'll just need to talk about the efforts you've made there, be transparent, help us understand the context, what's been tried, what hasn't been tried, where you think progress could be made. And then also let us know, okay, that being acknowledged that you're not able to get buy-in from this critical partner, let us know your anticipated path forward, how you would envision moving forward, accomplishing the goals of EDRN, even if you don't have that relationship. And in terms of what that means for letters of support, hopefully the suggested or the requirements are flexible enough that you could find another stakeholder who could kind of slot in to cover the role of whoever we're talking about here. But again, I think we're just hoping in the application to get a sense of all of these types of tensions and just how you're equipped to navigate them. All right, Ian, I'm gonna kick it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. Great. Okay, let's see where we left off. Are you able to share who signed up for this webinar to help us make connections? So unfortunately, we can't do that just writ large, but if you reach out to that email, edrn@newamerica.org, if we see people from your state that we know of, we can connect them to you. The next question is, how do you envision grantees funding the maintenance of infrastructure in the long run? Would they seek public funding, charge for access to the data, et cetera? So we are really hoping that this initial 2-year funding gives you that runway and the momentum to build sustainability. Ultimately, it's up to you how that happens. Our technologists are going to be really focused on tools and coding and those elements that can be maintained by existing staff in the long run. So it's not, it might be more complex, while you're in the cohort, but ultimately we hope that you're doing more of the maintenance functionality in the long run rather than, maybe some of the full build outs that you might be doing as part of the cohort. But how you do that in the long run is really going to be up to you, and probably would be part of our the latter part of the coaching to make sure that we don't you're not building something really exciting and great that then falls apart because there's no one to manage it at the end of 2 years. That's not going to serve anyone in the long run. So sustainability is certainly a focus of this effort. What if we can't secure a funding match? So our grant terms only allow us to disperse our funds based on receipt of the match. So we would not be able to distribute any funds. And I think you would have to make a pretty strong argument for how you will be able to have that dedicated capacity to not inhibit the work without something there. If you feel like you can make that argument, then do it in the application. But we would just really encourage everyone to get creative about how they can go about across the state, pulling from all corners of where you live to achieve that mesh. Can you speak more about that awarded grantees may contract but not subgrant? I mean, a contract looks like you have hired a contractor, and a subgrant is a much more complicated dynamic between a grantee and a subgrantee. And we're just really wanting to not split these funds and kind of parse them down. And so we would really want to see that a contract is clear, but that there's not all the elements of subgranting. If our organization has a state or federally approved indirect rate over 10%, can we use that rate? So that federally approved indirect rate is probably for federal or state grants. You're welcome to put that in, but we would probably be working with states to get closer to what we put in the budget template. Are you suggesting that New America will access our data? No. So this is your state's eviction data. We would not be accessing any of this without your consent. So in the past cohort, some of those partners did arrange for us, to have access to some of that data to ease on the technical support side. So that might be a BAA or some sort of MOU, but we will not have, unfettered access unless you agree to that, or to what level of access you would want us to have. And again, typically it's around that tech support function. And so can you clarify whether we'll be accessing data or retained by the state entity, and will they retain proprietary and confidential personally identifiable information? So this is one of the things that we are looking at is we do have these court kind of eviction data standards. And that's going to, all of the kind of data sharing governance functions vary state to state. And so we would be working with each of the states to figure out what is it that you all can collect and at what level. But we are not accessing that data unless you want us to. So can you confirm that the requirement is 80% of renter households in the state? Yes. So we are trying to get a really comprehensive statewide coverage, not just, a few urban corridors here and there. We really want to see a broad reach across the state. Helen, do you want to take the one about distinctions between the types of data?
Sure. So someone asked, can you speak more about the distinctions in the types of data between evictions filed, judgments, executed evictions, etc.? Great question. So not all, when we say eviction data, that's not going to look like a monolith. Like if you are requesting data from your court, you're not just going to say, can you send us the data? And they'll know exactly what to include. Because the eviction process in the court is long and complicated, and there's a lot of different steps in the process, and at each step, additional information is generated, and that's the data we'll look at. So to be a little bit more specific, I think we're interested in the data that people analyze through EDRN, just showing as comprehensive of a picture as possible about the way that renters in your state are experiencing the eviction process. And so, maybe you already have eviction filing data. Taking, if invited to participate, like maybe taking it up to the next level would look like, okay, now let's get judgment data. Now let's get data on executed evictions. And so each partner's data goals will look slightly different depending on what they already have and what's most important to the housing community in their state. But I think despite that flexibility, there is going to be some sort of, standard that we are helping usher partners towards, related to, making sure that filings are represented, and that the data is updated in a timely manner. But I guess all that being said, I would recommend checking out our FAQ on our website because there is a question that touches on this.
Okay. I think we have reached The massive questions. Thanks for everyone who has also, just offered to make connections with your state colleagues as well. As Helen mentioned, we have a lot of this in the FAQs, so would strongly encourage you to dig in there, and then we will be updating the FAQs as questions come in to our email inbox.
I think there's one more question that came in.
Sure, I can take this one. Yes, someone asked, can you define timely data updating? Yeah, excuse me, that was kind of a vague term. They said we have very small counties that we will not be able to update frequently. Great question. So, this is not a hard and fast, gating item that's going to exclude some people from being eligible to participate. We know that, it's no secret that getting statewide data from all the counties in your state is going to be a huge undertaking, which is exactly why, dedicated capacity is needed through the EDRN to make it happen. And so, whatever starting point you're coming in from, if invited to participate, we will work with you to improve and take it up to the next level. Like I said, you have filings, let's also add in judgments. Maybe you have quarterly data coming in from the larger cities, but you don't have data reporting at all from very small counties. Maybe let's try to get the small counties reporting, twice a year or something like that. That's just an example. But I think that as in all of the different qualities we've mentioned of, the context within your state that you're coming in with, the different challenges that your specific judicial or political or legal framework is posing for consolidating eviction data in your state. Just let us know, be transparent in your application, what that all looks like. And the important thing is just indicating how what the path forward you see is in order to improve and create a statewide eviction data infrastructure. We have a few more minutes, so please feel free to continue asking questions. Okay, we just got another question. I will go ahead and address this one. What would EDRN participation look like for states that already collect and publish eviction-related data and have some eviction prevention efforts? Great question. We know that everyone's coming in from a different starting place, and some people already have really quite sophisticated efforts in both data and eviction prevention areas. And so again, the goal of EDRN is just to move along the continuum of what's possible with eviction data, access and analysis, and action. And so wherever you're starting from, you as users or publishers or however you interact with that data, I'm sure that you may have something in mind of what's the next level you want to get to make this data really actionable for housing stability in your state. And so again, we're open to people applying who are in a variety of those starting points. And so again, just paint us a picture in your application of where you're at now and where you'd like to go.
Thanks. The next one is, what does footprint on the 80% of state renting households mean? So this is really, a benchmark for the data coverage we'd like you to have by the end of the 2-year cohort. So we want you to demonstrate that you more or less have statewide reach. You're not just concentrated in one city or county or one part of the state. You don't have to come in saying we can absolutely do 80%, today, March 3rd, but have a vision for how you would get there to 80% by the end of the cohort. And if there's no further questions right now, just encourage you as you dig into the application. Um, First stop is the landing page with the FAQs. And then if you don't see your question answered there, please feel free to drop us a line at that edrn@newamerica.org. And we will be publishing FAQs throughout and updating that page as well. So yeah, let's see. A question came in about if we do have a somewhat robust system already, do we have the next steps planned out, or is that something you discuss along the way? Like that's the point. We're going to have some states in our cohort that are maybe in the beginner phase, some that are at the intermediate phase, some that are in the advanced phase. We want them to be learning from one another to accelerate that learning, as well as being able to figure out and imagine, wow, we're in the advanced phase, but we're still seeing X as part of our challenge. And so how do we solve for that? And so we really will be working with you to just imagine and envision some of that possibility for what you would want to get out of the cohort.
And I'll actually add on and just as a further food for thought, if you're finding yourself in the situation where you're interested in applying and you're in maybe that more advanced stage of already having fairly robust eviction data analysis, you're likely still nonetheless seeing a lot of challenges with renter stability and with widespread evictions in your state. And so maybe something I'll offer is maybe the question, okay, what do we need to know? What else do we need to know in order to prevent these evictions or to get a handle on renter stability? That might give you a guiding idea of where to go next and how to get up to the next level.
There's a question, if we work for an Office of Housing and Community Development Department, what do we need to provide as our sign off of an organization to participate? So if you're if you're the entity that's applying, we assume that there's buy-in at your department. But we would love to see, is there another state level agency for that letter of support that you could bring to bear? If you are maybe a mid-level person within that department, could we get something from your director or someone who leads that department? So just if I'm interpreting that question correctly, I hope that answers it if you're in one of those categories. Okay, I think we can wrap. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar, for thinking about the application, for applying. We really look forward to seeing what you have and what you're envisioning. And just best of